Welcome once again to the Cow Report. I'm your host, Chuck Lee, and it's a beautiful May evening here, May 23rd, 1994. And of course, with me as always is my rusty sidekick, Fred, Mr. Wright Stafford, to my immediate left, but he wouldn't want to be called a leftist, I know that. But as you can see there, well, you can't see. Yes, you can. Fred has his pop there. It's called Fred's Pop, I think.
Oh, that's the best pop.
And I offered you 1995, and I know you turned me down.
We're doing great guns. We got a second order for a bottle.
Good, good. And well, with us tonight, Fred, is Mr. Will Pouts, and he's going to talk to us and tell us about this inner-outer bypass controversy, which has been raging now for roughly 20 years.
Yes. But you don't want to talk about this controversy that's been raging between our pop and that Fraven slop?
No, not right offhand. But,
It's
Mr.
genuine.
Welcome you to the program, Mr. Pouts.
Thank you.
And I know you're a former professor at the university. What did you teach out there?
I've been at the university for 30 and a half years. I retired in January, and I was teaching history and philosophy of education and school law primarily.
Uh-huh.
And I had a research course for graduate students as well.
And so, I mean, it's not like you've never been around the block. You know a little bit about studying things, and I know you've turned this thing inside and out, and so I'm sure that we'll have plenty of good information tonight on just what this inner-outer bypass deal is all about. And we'll be taking your calls tonight, too. This is live, so we're coming to you live from the beautiful downtown L.E. Phillips Library in the basement. And, of course, the program is brought to you by Flavin Pop and the new subsidiary, Fred's Pop. And
that's homemade, too. I'm making it in my bathtub.
that's what I heard. And we will be taking calls, and you can hear the phone's already ringing. So this is the Cow Report, and we are live. And this thing, like I say, has been raging for on and off for 20 years. Now it finally seems like it's coming down to a head, Mr. Pouts or Will. And why has there been such a controversy on the inner and outer bypass?
Well, actually, the Highway 53 is a 40-year project.
40?
For 40 years, they've been working on the northern part and coming down this way, and the idea was to do something for northwest Wisconsin that would increase jobs, make the part of the state more attractive, and probably bring in tourists as well. This last segment here between Chippewa Falls and Highway 94 is the last one really to be considered for construction.
And then once this is done, then we'll have pretty much a clear shot all the way to Duluth.
Pretty
Close
much,
to it.
yes. There are not all of the interchanges north of Rice Lake are at freeway structure, so that you won't be able to go 65 all the way up to Superior, but there are stretches there in which north of Chippewa Falls, continuing from I-94, that you will be able to go 65 on.
Okay, now I noticed there was an ad in tonight's Leader Telegram, and it's dated April 12th of 1994. It says in parentheses, released to the media on this date. So somebody kind of stonewalled that ad for almost a month and a half before, and then I guess you had to, somebody had to pay for it. Now, are you with the WCWR S53?
Actually, I'm not a member. The Highway 53, there are a couple committees going. The one you're referring to is a fundraising committee.
All right.
And I'm not a member of that committee, but when they brought Ed Garvey up here, I did go to one of their meetings with Garvey, and so I do know what they're about.
Okay.
Actually, the ad in tonight's paper, in the Leader Telegram paper, is a press release that former Senator Marvin Rochelle and Pink Van Gordon from Neillsville area, who were both TPC members, released on the date that you have there in April. The Leader Telegram kind of took off on them that time and bad-mouthed them for everything they said in there, but they never made known what it was that Rochelle and Van Gordon had said. And so therefore we thought it was appropriate to put it in, let the people see what the position of these former TPC members happen to be.
Okay, and these two are Marv Rochelle, former state senator, and Pink Van Gordon, former representative, and they both have came down on the side of the outer bypass, as well as several other former and present state legislators and senators. And on top of that, how many communities?
Well, we have 22 resolutions right now for the outer bypass, or opposing the inner bypass. So 22 municipal boards have passed resolutions favoring the outer bypass, really.
And what is there, like 3 that have favored the inner?
I think it's probably up to about 6 or more.
Okay.
But there are several communities that have passed so-called neutral resolutions, like Hayward, Menominee, and so forth, we're told.
Okay, well, we'll be taking calls, and we have two callers waiting now, so be patient, and we'll get to you. But I wanted to get one more thing in now. As far as legislators, present and past, from this area, I think all of them have came down on the side of the outer except for one, and he's for the inner. Is that true?
Yes. Mr. Plombon has been for the inner all the way through.
I guess one more came on board for the inner.
Mike Wilder from Chippewa Falls also in the last month decided to go for the inner.
Okay, and why, after all this fighting and stuff, and Wayne Laufenberg, a candidate for 60th Assembly, at one time called for a referendum and tried to meet with a couple of the county board committees in Chippewa and Eau Claire County, why is this all coming to a head now? And it seems like there's almost a campaign going on now, like you got 2 candidates running out there. One candidate wants the inner and the other wants the outer, but instead of candidate, it's the concept of the inner or the outer. Why now at the end here is the city of Eau Claire spending $18,000 to promote the inner, and how come it's all coming to a head right at this point?
Well, this summer there will be hearings held by the Transportation Projects Commission, and this is done every 2 years in preparation for the next biennial budget. So in the past, there have been projects throughout the state. There's been one hearing in the northern part of the state. The last one 2 years ago was at Appleton. And then there's another hearing in the southern part of the state for those communities that have projects going there. And so after hearing presentations on all the projects, then the TPC waits until usually late November. And then they select by vote projects that should be included in the next biennial budget.
So this posturing and stuff is basically geared towards the TPC to get them to change their vote or vote one way or the other. It's kind of a massive lobbying effort against that group.
That basically is what you have there. In all these hearings, both those that are testifying for and against a certain route are heard by the TPC, and that's what both sides are getting ready for now.
Well, was it ethical for the city of Eau Claire to take $18,000 of taxpayers' money and spend it primarily to promote the inner? I mean, there's a lot of those taxpayers' dollars that maybe they don't want it to go for the inner.
Well, here again you have government. The previous city council in Eau Claire did have a resolution favoring the inner bypass. And supposedly this council didn't take a direct vote on it, but basically I think all of them, and most all of them in running for the positions that they hold, were advocates for the inner bypass. So they probably think they are representing the people.
Okay, we're going to take a call here on line 1, and
This is one taxpayer they're not representing.
okay. Okay, caller, go ahead. You're on the air.
Talking to this, I was on hold for 5 minutes.
Okay, go ahead, caller. You're on the air.
Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Fine.
All right, yeah. I have a question for y'all. All right, now, why is it every time Eau Claire presents a bypass, it's turned down? You know, I'm saying that if they want to have some come to Eau Claire, they should have, something to come to. Because, okay, they got a couple malls here, right? That's all they got. If they had like a place, like an outlet mall, let's say for like a thing like GPX or anything, just like any kind of like store that would present the public.
Okay, well, thank you, GPX. And by the way, we know who GPX is. He's just a young high school kid that thinks he's cool by calling you and tying up the line, but he's not impressing anybody. And if you don't quit doing it, we'll have to deal with you in another way, which possibly would include prosecution for making illegal phone calls. Okay, go ahead, caller.
Hello, I was asking my neighbor Matt Smith about bypass.
Yeah.
He was saying he's an unemployed child molester. He was saying.
Okay. Well, Fred, what were you saying now about you're not too hot about this?
As a taxpayer and a resident of this city, I believe it's only logical to put that bypass where a bypass should be, outside of the city limits, and enable people who want to go north to go through. Now, when I go through, if I go north and I want to go into Rice Lake, I go in, I get off, and I go into Rice Lake. If I want to go to Cameron, I do the same thing. Want to go to Chautauqua or want to go to Bloomer? I don't know why we have to be different here in Eau Claire. And incidentally, I don't have any property or any investment in any properties, either inner or outer.
Well, that would be a question we'll be asking tonight is what if there's a financial motivation for one route or the other. And we'll try and take another call here and see if our problems with the phone lines have been cleared up. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So now, is there people that are involved with, have you been able to unearth or studies, or has anyone looked in the plat books to see exactly who's going to benefit by an inner or an outer bypass?
Yes, there have been preliminary checks, but because there are different companies and development companies involved, and there are silent partners, it's almost impossible to find out who is involved financially. We do know that certain realtors in different parts of the city have taken different positions. There was an East Side business group, and that was composed in part at least of realtors and developers. And as you know, the inner bypass has more homes and apartments that will be affected, and so there will be more turnover. You would expect a realtor to be for that. In addition, it leaves quite a few houses next to the roadway, and those people didn't build those houses so that they could live next to a big roadway. So there probably will be additional turnover there. So I think you can say that realtors and developers do have a genuine interest in the inner because of the immediate turnover that would be occurring when a road would be built.
Okay, we're going to try and take a call here again. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hello. I'd like to ask where exactly is the inner and the outer bypass going to be?
Have you got a little map that our cameraman can zero in on?
No, I don't.
Oh, we got one here. I mean, we've got one here that we're going to try and get up on the screen for you so you can point out.
Okay.
And, yeah, there's one.
I think probably we can put this one in.
Here, I can hold it while you're talking there. Okay. Oops. There, can you get in closer on that? Okay, there's...
Well, the bypass actually starts at what we call the Tank Farm interchange at Shopko North. And then, if we're talking in terms of the outer bypass, we're talking about a bypass that's going to go just to the east of...
okay, which one of those two there on the screen is?
This would be the outer bypass, and it would pass just to the east of Lake Altoona at this point. This is what is known as the metropolitan area. There is a Chippewa Falls, Eau Claire urban area plan made in 1975 to 2000, and that identifies that the urban area will go just a little bit to the east of Lake Altoona and come down here. So the outer bypass was designed to be a boundary for the urban area, so that there would kind of be a buffer there, just as I-94 to the south has formed a buffer and prevents development across to the south of it. It has worked pretty well that way for 30 years, and that's what the outer bypass was supposed to be doing here also. The inner bypass starts from the tank farm and parallels the existing Hastings Way. So it is in this area. And so it comes through Halley first of all, then through Seymour, then through Altoona, and then joins the existing highway between the two malls.
Now, we got another call waiting here, but that inner bypass there, it seems like they're just going to move the highway over just a few.
Yes, in most cases,
2 yards.
In most cases, it's less than a mile, and of course, it merges up north and also down south, so it's very close in certain areas, only several blocks away. Actually, if you're familiar with the area, and if you go from Mega Foods to Altoona, if you get down in the valley there, it is to be down in the valley before you get back up to the high ground in Altoona.
Did you have a question about the bypass issue, caller?
No, but I think the outer bypass sounds a lot better.
Well, it seems to be the way to go if you're a tourist or a semi-truck driver, and we're talking here about taking some pristine land there in that area of Altoona there and just devastating it pretty much to put a road in there.
Yes, the inner bypass will take much urban green space, and that's probably one of the most precious things that you have in our society as we live more and more in cities and urban areas. It is true that there will be destruction of the environment regardless of which of the two will be built. But the question is, where do you want to destroy it? Do you want to destroy it where people live, or do you want to destroy it where fewer people can take advantage of it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for calling in, caller. Do you have another question? Or?
Well, I was kind of wondering what it would do, what the inner bypass would do to Otter Creek. How close would it be to that?
Good question.
Well, actually, if you start from the south at Highway 12, the inner bypass is actually a little bit to the west of Otter Creek, but then as soon as it crosses Highway 12, it will cross Otter Creek and be to the east of it from there to Spooner Avenue. And of course the creek will be downhill from it, and if there's any drainage, if you have toxic spills or salt in the wintertime or all the other trace minerals that we get, there's only one way that it can go, and that is downhill to Otter Creek and eventually into the Eau Claire River through the Eau Claire Country Club.
Mm-hmm. Well, does that help you out, caller?
Sure it is. Thanks a lot, Chuck.
Okay, thank you.
Bye now.
Bye. You know, where's the what about the environmentalists on this issue? We have Greenpeace and there's Northern Thunder. Have they came down on either side of this issue, or neutral, or?
Yes, we have quite a few statements regarding that. The DNR, of course, has been involved with it. Former Senator Nelson has written a letter in regard to Otter Creek. It appeared in the first environmental impact study, the draft. The Sierra Club has taken a position. Most all of them agree that the environment would be damaged least if we built on the present route. Then beyond that, there's a lot of equivocating. In no situation does the DNR or any other group absolutely say that they wouldn't accept a route on the outer bypass. Most of them do shade, however, and say that probably there would be less destruction on the inner bypass. As far as we can tell from the DOT's viewpoint, environment isn't just too important. And basically, if you saw the TV 13 report last Saturday night, the public really doesn't care too much about the environment either.
Well, you know, that urban sprawl is going to get past Lake Altoona any way you look at it. It's got to grow that way.
Well, the urban sprawl at Princeton Valley has gone beyond where the inner bypass would be already. If you go farther north in Halley, there is again housing already east of where the inner bypass would be. And the same thing is true on both the north and the south shore of Lake Altoona. The outer bypass, that would be a boundary and it would stop urban sprawl for a while, just as I-94 did on the south. It lasted for about 30 years, and now, of course, we are hopping across. So the only bypass that could slow or stop urban sprawl would be the outer bypass. Many people talk about the amount of farmland taken by the highway. The amount of farmland taken by the highway is next to nothing compared to the amount of farmland taken by developers. And so since, for instance, in the Princeton Valley area, the condominiums would be to the west of the inner bypass, but the trailer court farther out on LaSalle would be to the east of it and already passed there, and of course that development would continue and take farmland.
Okay, we'll try and take another call here on line one. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hi, what is the cost difference between the inner and the outer bypass, please?
Okay.
The ad in the paper tonight addresses that pretty well, and this has been the figure that we have been quoted in $1990 for the last 2 years. Actually, building the inner bypass would cost $64 million.
Wow.
Building the outer bypass would cost $45 million. But then we have associated with it improvements to Hastings Way.
Which are needed either way, right?
Which are needed either way because most people will continue to use Hastings Way. Neither the inner nor the outer bypass will solve the traffic problem on Hastings Way. Hastings Way must be improved. And if the inner bypass were built, the DOT has $15 million for Hastings Way improvements. If the outer bypass were built, there would be $23 million for Hastings Way improvement.
Boy, it would seem like the outer bypass would be the way to go, less stress on the taxpayers.
Well, it is a difference of at least $11 million if you're talking $1990. Of course, inflation will expand that beyond that.
Why do they have to put more money on the Hastings Way if they go with the outer?
Their point is that an outer bypass would take less traffic from Hastings Way. Therefore, they have in the environmental impact statement, for instance, at Melby Street, if there would be an outer bypass, there'd probably be an interchange and an overpass there. And so that is a $4 or $5 million item according to their listing here.
I think some of them things are already in the pipeline anyway. Some of them intersections are in bad shape.
Well,
They're like up there by Presto, that's Spaghetti Junction up there, some of them intersections.
Melby Road.
that is the Melby interchange, and supposedly they were going to rebuild that this summer. But the last I heard from the DOT, the bids came in at about $3 million, and they had allotted only about $1.5 million. And so now they're going to redo their drawings again and not construct it until a year from this summer. That's the last news I had on that.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you, caller. Okay, she was getting a little bit into taxes and how the outer bypass will save on taxes. I attended a township meeting at Seymour not too long ago, and they went through what how this is going to affect the real estate tax for Seymour Township. And the way they're talking, the outer bypass would take maybe $1,000 of taxes out of the Seymour Township coffers, whereas the inner bypass would take a very large sum of taxes off the rolls. Because once you build a highway, it's not taxed. Isn't that true?
That's correct. There is more valuable property in the inner corridor, and so more houses lost, more land that is valuable than what would be taken out in the inner corridor. And I think some of the cost of the cost difference between the two reflects the actual cost of the property they have to buy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Fred, we got some more callers waiting, but would you like to ask a question or make a comment?
You know, something I have noticed in riding over the to the north, over and going across the Chippewa River, there's quite a few cars that take that as particularly during rush hours. So that has taken some of that traffic off the existing Hastings Way, and nobody says anything about that, about the alleviation there.
From the North Crossing, right?
Right?
Yeah, as that gets to be used more often, won't that help?
Well, the latest traffic counts that we have from the DOT in published form were taken a year ago in summer of '93, and so at that time the North Crossing wasn't open, and so I cannot give you any authoritative numbers because I go by the numbers that are in the environmental impact statement.
Okay, another thing I want to talk about is how do the people on Hastings Way feel about this? I mean, there's hundreds of businesses along the existing Hastings Way. Either bypass, either the outer bypass or the inner bypass, it's going to move a certain amount of traffic away from. Right now, everything's funneled down Hastings Way. It's like a big funnel, and then just everything goes down there, and then it's funneled north or funneled south. But it gets trapped in that one section from basically the malls to the south up to the tank farms on the north. You got a bottleneck in there. So how do the Hastings Way people feel about it, Hastings Way businesses?
Our best indication, Senator Zine took a survey about 2 years ago of the business owners on the current route, Hastings Way. And he sent his questionnaires, I think, to about 200 of the business owners, and he got a very good response rate. As I recall, it was 90% or more. And those of us who were for the outer were really fearing this because we thought the business owners would really want to keep the traffic close to them. But to our surprise, only 35% of the business owners on current Hastings Way supported the inner. Mm-hmm. So that means 65% of them either wanted to keep Hastings Way or go with the outer or don't do anything. But to think that only a third of them would support, that was strange. On the other hand, if you take a look at the results that TV 13 got just last Saturday, there you again, you have only 34% of the people that were called on the phone supporting the inner bypass, whereas 55% favored the outer bypass. And so in all of the polls that have been taken, and there have been about 10 of them or so, and I worked up a summary of all those polls, and basically the 35%, that's about where the support for the inner bypass is.
Okay. We'll take a call here on line one and
put you on hold.
Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Hello?
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fine. I guess what I'd like to say is I am an Eau Claire resident, and I am definitely in favor of the outer bypass. And the reason being that I am a frequent traveler between Eau Claire and Milwaukee and Eau Claire and Superior. And I feel in years to come, as our state grows to the north, we're going to have a tremendous amount of heavy commercial truck traffic. I see that daily now in my travels between Milwaukee and Superior. And I don't believe that this kind of traffic is the kind of traffic that we're going to want going through our city here. Plus the fact that the major portion of the traffic that goes through the city on Hastings Way during the summer months is all tourist trade. And all these people are trying to do is get from Milwaukee, Chicago, the southern areas, wherever they're coming from, up to the northern areas. It's congested. It's terrible. And I don't think that rerouting any of that stuff through the inner bypass is going to be of any benefit.
Yeah, right now you have willing and unwilling
Pardon?
Right now, we have willing and unwilling customers, we're bottlenecking everybody in here.
Well, that's true. And I believe that anybody that is trying to promote the inner bypass at this point, and I can understand where they're coming from, I think the business end of it has got a lot to do with it.
It would seem that way.
They want the revenue that they're going to get off of the people that are passing through the area. But I think if you look at any relatively large city, and not only in our state, but in any other state that has a bypass, they're not really hurting and losing revenue dollars because the people that would spend that kind of money are passing through their cities anyway.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
In the
And I do believe, and I'm going to quit after this, but I do believe that the truck traffic, the semis, the 18-wheelers, I've seen it in the last 5 or 6 years that I've been on the road. It has increased very heavily. And as our state grows to the north and going up towards Superior and up towards the Ashland area and going up into the upper Minnesota area, you're going to see a very big increase in commercial traffic. And I don't think we want that running through our city.
Well, I was talking to Wally Jerome from Jerome Foods just last week. And Jerome Foods, during the last 10 months, has sent over 1,700 semis down south on 53. And Jerome Foods doesn't want or expect any of those to stop in Eau Claire and make deliveries. They're the number 10th ranking firm in the nation, and they go throughout the nation. And so Jerome Foods, with 1,500 employees up there, really wants the outer bypass so that they can keep in business. And another thing that's involved there, yes, it's a business interest, because the inner bypass would be a 1.5 miles longer than the outer bypass. On a round trip, it costs Jerome Foods $3 of needless of mileage. And so therefore, you're talking $6,000 a year just for one firm. We also did a survey of the major trucking firms in this area. This was done very early. I think it was done in 1990. And 80% of them preferred the outer bypass. 20% preferred current Hastings Way, improving that, because that gets them closer to any deliveries that they might have in Eau Claire. But none of them favored the inner bypass at all, because that takes them where they don't want to go, regardless whether they want to go through or stop here.
Well, I think we're doing ourselves a very big service if we allow ourselves to be subjected to the DOT and have them tell us where they want it rather than what the people want.
Especially when it's our tax dollars.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not purporting to be a highway specialist, but where I'm coming from is I'm on the interstate constantly, and I see the traffic patterns, and I see the way it has increased over the last 5 to 6 years, and I can see where it's going to go in the next 5 to 6 years and 10 to 20 years down the road. And that's all I can say right now.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, caller.
Well, you mentioned the tourist industry, and the Barron County Highway Committee did a survey of the major tourist and resort owners from Chippewa Falls northward. And 88% of the resort and campground owners favored the outer bypass. And these were people that were serving more than 44,000 guests each year. The Chippewa County, or the Barron County Highway Committee, also did a study of the business and industries along the corridor from Chippewa Falls northward to Superior. And in that situation, 84% of those business owners, Louisiana Pacific and the others that send their products southward, 84% of those favored the outer bypass as the best option.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we have another call. Is it line 2 or line 1? Well, we'll give it a try. Hello, caller.
Hello. How are you gentlemen tonight?
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a couple comments. First, regarding the pristine nature of Otter Creek. That area had been logged off. It is no longer pristine. It has influence of man, human activity. The other thing is, if you walk along there, you notice that several of the people that live along there in years past have used that as a dump site. There's several areas where there's garbage and trash and junk laying down in there. So to consider that a pristine area, I think that's kind of misleading. I had another comment about the 1975 to 2000 urban area plan that was cited. That was a plan that looked at future development of the Eau Claire urban area based on the assumptions of that time, and certainly they were looking at a probable replacement or some sort of highway to take traffic off of Hastings Way. And they thought a logical place for that might be a proposed 53 corridor east of Lake Altoona. However, subsequent to that, there was a 1985 to 2010 long-range highway plan that was done that looked at that proposed corridor and saw that it would not alleviate the problem on on Hastings Way, and said that there needed to be further study to look at what would be the solution that would take care of the traffic problem on Hastings Way. And that's where the DOT has gone. They've looked at alternatives and looked at what is going to alleviate the traffic problem on Hastings Way and come up with the inner corridor based on their EIS and studies. I think it's presumptuous for these people to be coming to you and pretending like they have facts and figures and data that supports an outer corridor as any kind of solution to the traffic problem that we need to address here in Eau Claire. And I think that you've got a lot of misinformation going out there from these people, a lot of emotional arguments that don't have basis in fact, and really a lot of people getting involved in this that it really doesn't affect. This is a traffic problem that affects the Chippewa Falls and Eau Claire primarily, and I don't think Jerome Foods, it's going to impact their business a whole heck of a lot to have to move their trucks a little bit beyond. For one thing, with the inner bypass, those trucks are going to move through there much faster than on present Hastings Way. If these people, these obstructionists, these people that don't want this thing in their backyard continue to obstruct us, we're not going to have any solution for many, many years to come. And we need to solve the problem now. And as far as cost goes, I think there's going to be much savings in cost, even if you build a project that costs more in the beginning. You got to remember it's an investment, and it's going to bring you returns in improved traffic and less accidents on Hastings Way. And I guess I'll give you a chance to comment. I just wanted to express those views.
Well, Mr.
Yes,
Paul?
I have a copy of the long-range highway plan 1985 to 2010 that the gentleman was talking about. And if he will look at map 18, he will see that this highway plan does have the outer bypass as the designated route.
Oh, it's not designated. It's a proposed route, and what they're doing is looking at that as what was proposed to begin with. But if you read that document, you'll see that only, according to their accounts, only takes a little over 4,000 cars off of Hastings Way per day. Totally inadequate. When you're talking about traffic loads of over 20,000 cars per day, 4,000 is not going to solve the problem on Hastings Way.
Here's the map that he was talking about now. Where did that show the outer bypass was?
It shows the outer bypass right here from the Tank Farm interchange going to the east of Lake Altoona and coming in here at I-94, southeast of the current interchange near the malls.
That's where it comes, that spot where they cross down, well, let's see, cross down right here, that's the mall area?
No, this would be Highway 12 at this point.
Yeah,
And the
okay.
mall is located over here, and then I-94 comes down this way, and
Yeah.
so they'd come together there. But the traffic count is an interesting thing.
Okay.
The number that he quoted is indeed in here. However, if you'll take a look at the draft environmental impact statement, the DOT said it had done studies, and as a result of its study, it concluded that 16% of the traffic on current Hastings Way in a no-build situation would be through traffic and take either the inner or the outer bypass. So using their figures, this meant that by 2010, 9,760 through traffic would be using the outer bypass. At the time that this project was announced, on March 3rd, 1989, I believe it came out in the Eau Claire paper, Fred Ross indicated in his press release, at least the Leader Telegram has it printed there, and I just looked at it again last week, that 5,000 local traffic would be taken off of Hastings Way. So if you take the 5,000 local and the 9,760 through traffic, that gets you up over 14,000 already, and you haven't said anything about the regional traffic, which either starts here in Eau Claire and goes outside of the urban area, or the shoppers that come from the northwest area, Stanley, Winter, and so forth, and come here. The DOT indicated that if there were a connection between the outer bypass and the mall area, an additional 1,800 would use that. So already you're up to 16,560 vehicles per day on average that the DOT says in the preliminary environmental impact study would use an outer bypass. But yet they have never acknowledged this. They never add them up. And if you want total traffic, you have to combine through traffic, local traffic, and regional traffic, which they have never done. There was a traffic count done in 1990. Every 3 years it's done, 1990, 93. I don't have the 93 figures before me. But in 1990, the access roads to Eau Claire that cross the outer bypass had an average daily number of vehicles of 14,494. And so we ask the people up at DOT, how many of those 14,000 vehicles that cross the outer bypass would use the outer bypass? And he says there's really nothing that can give you an absolute figure, but our rule of thumb is half of them that come to it will either get on or get off. And so that would give you 7,200 vehicles per day. And by 2010, it would probably be up to 9,400 based upon the DOT projections. So you take that for the year 2010, and those three types of traffic, the local, the regional, and the outer, or the through, comes to 19,160 vehicles per day based upon what the DOT has stated in the environmental impact study. In addition, on Memorial Day of 1990, they had 17,000 vehicles per day over average coming through on that Friday, I believe it was, of Memorial Day weekend. And if you add those 17 to the 19, had that outer bypass been there in year 1990, there would have been 31,000 vehicles that would have used the outer bypass in 1990, according to the draft environmental impact statement.
Mm-hmm.
Right, and you're only stating figures for the outer corridor.
I'm only stating figures that the DOT has in the draft environmental impact statement.
Right, and you are not a traffic engineer and are maybe mixing apples and oranges with which may seem to be reasonable, your approach to adding these numbers, but I don't know if that's a sound methodology. And also, you are not stating what the projected loads are on Hastings Way and what what would be taken off of Hastings Way with an inner corridor. So we cannot make any comparisons, and you know we're left with only your figures.
Well, no, these are all DOT figures. These are
they're not DOT figures because they have not combined them in the way that you have.
Well, they haven't combined them at all.
Right, because I don't know if that's, as far as proper methodology, if you can even do that and come up with reasonable assumptions. Those are assumptions that you are making, but they may not be based on proper methodology. And see, that's where the problem is because you're not a traffic engineer. DOT, they are the traffic engineers.
Yeah, and they make mistakes, too.
I am not making any assumptions at all. I am just taking the DOT's statements to us.
You just stated your assumptions.
No, I didn't state any assumptions. I told you the numbers that I took from the draft environmental impact statement.
But you are assuming that these combinations are going to occur and come up with significant numbers.
No, I am merely doing what the DOT says, that if you want total traffic, you must add local, regional, and through.
Well, that would give you a more accurate count, it would seem to anyway.
Well, that's their method of doing it, and that's what it adds up to.
You know, how before you build something, how can you determine how many cars or vehicles are going to go over it? You make a guesstimate. That's what it is, a guesstimate.
Yeah. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I won't take any more of your time.
All right, thanks. Now, we got another call waiting, but in the ad, it tells about how the DOT seems to be leading people astray by saying that the inner bypass is the only route that's going to be built, or else. Now, I understand the DOT makes their recommendations to a body that is an appointed commission called a TPC, and they make the determinations. Is that true?
That's true. The DOT makes recommendations, and they, in all probability, will recommend the inner bypass this time. On the other hand, they were ready to do this 2 years ago, and when it came down to it, it wasn't the people who, for the outer bypass or any other group of people that were obstructing the construction of this road 2 years ago. The obstructionists were the DOT, who withdrew the project and didn't even allow the Transportation Projects Commission to vote on it, whether they should construct it or not. So that's where the obstruction was 2 years ago.
They were afraid that it was going to go the other way, probably.
Very likely.
Okay, let's try and take another caller. Go ahead, caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, say, I know that the inner bypass has already been decided way before, you know, all this has come out. The outer bypass, they ain't even surveyed that yet, but the inner bypass has all been surveyed and flagged out already for the highway to go in right there. And I'm basically wondering why you know they're saying that there's hope for the outer bypass, which there isn't.
Well, the final environmental impact study that just came out last month indicates that the DOT took the inner and the outer, these last two options, after throwing out Hastings Way and no build, and did a thorough environmental impact study of both corridors, not just the inner. It is true that they have done some overflights and done some flagging in the inner. I believe that has not been done in the outer. But a draft environmental impact statement exists for both of the routes according to their final statement.
I prefer the outer bypass, and I think everybody in the Altoona area would prefer the outer bypass than to have it in the inner because of the traffic and the people that have got their houses built in there.
Isn't this kind of a David and Goliath situation? Eau Claire kind of throwing their weight around because they're 5-10 times bigger than Altoona and they think they can get away with it?
Well, this seems to have been indicative of past dealings, but actually you may have heard on television that during last week delegations from Eau Claire and from other communities, including Altoona, but it wasn't Altoona alone. There were, I think, 4 different communities represented that went down to Madison. And I think what they heard is that from TPC members there is sentiment for amending any recommendation that might be submitted by the DOT. This doesn't mean that it's the inner or nothing, because local officials, as the ad in the paper tonight indicate, may try to give you the impression that they make the decision, but they do not, according to Wisconsin statute. The Transportation Projects Commission may recommend approval with modifications, or disapproval of any project according to Wisconsin statute 13.489.
Because there's a lot of homes out there that have just been built, and they're probably worth about $100,000 homes out there.
On the inner bypass route, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Those will either have to be bulldozed out or moved.
Well, I know of no expensive homes in Altoona. There are a couple apartment houses that are near Highway 12 there that might run into real money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I want to thank you for calling in, caller.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Got another call. We'll try and get in a few more before we call it an evening. Go ahead, caller.
Yeah. Did I hear comments made that on the Melby Street Hastings Way intersection they took bids on building a structure there, but because the bids were too high, they didn't build it? Am I correct? Is that what I heard?
That is what I was told, I think a week ago Friday, from a DOT source, yes.
They took bids.
I
They
heard...
actually built an interchange there and the bids were too high?
I heard it came over budget, and they did not have the funds to build it this summer, and they were going to redraw it. And
are you sure you're right that they took bids? You said they took bids.
I don't know how they got their figures from their contractors, whether they took bids or whether these informal submissions or what they were, but it was on schedule to be built this summer.
You said they took bids.
They may have.
You know what you're talking about?
Yes, they got what the actual cost would be.
You tell me when they took the bids. I want to know. You're throwing out a lot of talk up there, and a lot of it sounds kind of smoky.
Well, are you familiar with it? Are they going to build that intersection this summer?
I don't know.
Well,
you're the one that said they took the bid.
Well, the engineers, they make up their own estimates before they put out bids so that they can keep pretty close to budget.
Usually they try.
So there is a ballpark.
I understand that, but I was unaware any bids were taken and rejected because they came in over the budget. And that's what was said, if I'm correct. Isn't that what you said?
The DOT got the costs for building it this summer.
They took bids.
They may have taken bids. I don't know whether they did, but they got the price estimates from the builders.
Okay, but you said they took bids and the bids were rejected.
They may have.
They came in over the budget.
They decided not to build this summer, so evidently whatever figures they got, they rejected.
Yeah, okay, there's a difference between getting some figures and taking bids.
Well, yes, that's a technicality, isn't it?
Well, no, it ain't a technicality.
Yes.
It makes it sound like a project was let at a Wisconsin State Highway letting, and it was rejected because the money was too high. Now,
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I have a question I'd like to ask the guy in the blue cap there that's talking.
Yes.
If
I don't have any investment in an outer bypass. Yes, I am an Eau Claire resident. Yes.
Why do you suppose the DOT is recommending the inner bypass?
Well, I've been wondering that myself. I can't quite understand it because they're going to have to build an outer bypass down the road. Then it's going to cost us more money.
Well, how far down the road?
10, 20 years?
30 years? 40 years?
Well, look at the Claremont Avenue. That was supposed to solve all the problems. How long did that last? Everything built south of Claremont pretty quick. Now we got them jumping over 94.
Well, the interstate was built out there before Claremont was upgraded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now we got Claremont's pretty much up to capacity, isn't it? It's pretty crowded on that.
Yeah, Claremont is pretty crowded. I'll agree with that.
Yeah. But anyway, whatever you look at, that Hastings Way is going to have to be improved. Either another lane added on each way.
Well, it seems kind of funny. Wisconsin's had a reputation for years of having one of the top highway systems in the country, anywhere you go.
Yeah.
And we have a highway department, the DOT, that is well respected all over. And they have professional highway traffic engineers on there, and they spend a lot of money making studies and recommendations. And then all kinds of people come in and say, well, this isn't right or that isn't right. Why do we have a highway department if we're not going to pay attention to them? And they did.
That's a good question. I guess they aren't human. They don't make mistakes.
Everybody can make mistakes.
Wow.
Well, you know, when
this is one big mistake they're trying to foist upon us is an inner bypass.
Why are they trying to foist it upon us?
Well, that's a good question. I'd like to know that. I don't have that answer.
That's a pretty strong allegation to make.
Yeah, I know it is.
You bet.
That's my personal opinion.
Okay.
Well,
and I'm not an engineer either.
I know.
The map
I don't
I'm
work for the DOT, never did.
The map I'm looking
But
at
I use the roads.
Huh?
This map here shows an outer bypass in the 85 to 2010 projections.
Well, is it recommended? Has there been an impact study made on that?
Yes.
Well, for some reason,
economic or otherwise?
Well, for some reason, they switched from this recommendation to an inner.
Well, wonder why they did.
I don't know. I wasn't there when that decision was made. But it looks to me like that you've got the rank and file politicians and city groups and organizations, government bodies throwing their weight to the outer, and then you've got a group of DOT people that are kind of like the Alamo that are saying, nope, we're sticking with this inner bypass.
I think a group of people have gone all over promoting other municipalities and townships and giving them the story about why there should be an outer bypass. But everything I heard is that about 80 to 90% of the traffic that uses 53 between Eau Claire and Chippewa is either coming from Eau Claire or going to Eau Claire. And if you look at a map, Eau Claire is right in the center of Highway 53 in Wisconsin. It runs from Superior to La Crosse. It connects the three major cities on the western side of the state. And most of the traffic is coming or going to Eau Claire from Superior or La Crosse or that area.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems sense that if they're trying to get to Eau Claire, let's get them here.
Yeah.
So some take it to get on I-94, though.
Well, if you fellas can find out when these bids were taken on Melby Road, put it on your cow report some night, and I'll be watching.
I could have swore I read some of the paper about them going to repair that this summer up there, but maybe that's a different intersection.
Well, there's a difference between talking about it and taking bids. I'm very interested in bids were taken.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay.
Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you. All right, I don't know if we got one more call in there or not. Go ahead, caller. We got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a comment. I think we definitely need the outer bypass. I agree that it's going to be built in 20, 30 years anyway. And I think the big push for the inner bypass with the city is they've seen what happened up Spooner with 53 bypass, and no one goes to Spooner anymore going north. And Spooner is just kind of dried up. There's a lot of businesses dry up there. I think the business people in Eau Claire are just worried that if we go with the outer, they're just going to dry up. They're not worried really about traffic.
Okay.
Inner bypass is not going to alleviate that much traffic.
Okay, well, thanks for your comment. Well, sorry, we're out of time once again.
I agree with that gentleman.
I want to thank you, Will Pouts, for showing up, and as usual, my trusty, rusty sidekick, Fred Mr. Wright Stafford. So we want to thank you, and we'll see you again right here on the Cow Report next Monday at 2 p.m. Good evening.